had it coming, he had it coming. He only had himself to blame. If you'd have been there, if you'd have seen it, I betcha you would have done the same. Hello, everybody, and welcome to LMIAY. The LMIAY, where you have the chance to defend anything, to be anything, to come up with your defense of anything. And you've done it. You guys have taken us there. Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today is the best day of the month, LMIAY time. That is where I give you guys a prompt. You guys write a short story or a fragment using that prompt, and then we read them together to see just how creatively amazing everybody is, because you all have such different voices, different perspectives, and to get different stories using the same thing, it's just beautiful. But before we get into the prompt, what it is today, what does the opening allude to? A couple of things. Number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, there are a couple of ways to be featured. Number one is what we're doing today, which is LMIAY, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt, you write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday, like today, we read those stories together, just have a great community time. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out, if you submit it to the Fresh Meat feature, the first chapter and your cover, that chapter will be read here on the channel, so hopefully help more readers find your work. It is my way of trying to get stuff out there. I can't read every book. There's no way. I'm behind on the stuff that I am supposed to already read and stuff that I'm meant to do for other people. Hopefully I can get it together a little bit. But every book, I'm not the reader for every book. So the feature is my way to hopefully help readers find their audience that are not necessarily me. And sometimes I grab books out of there as well. The third thing is if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. My next book comes out in October. It is Body More Zero, featuring these gentlemen right here. Hopefully you'll check it out if it interests you. But also, if you do, I hope not to disappoint. But I always prepare for that. With that said, let's get into the monthly prompt, and that is, you're begging for understanding for the crimes that you've committed. What is your angst/trauma? Try to get out of being held accountable. This was brought on by a story discussed on the server where a bunch of people were doing some bad things, and in the middle of said bad things, they were excusing themselves as to why they were allowed to do said bad things because they had trauma. And so, in a lot of cases, in a lot of books, we end up with stories of characters who try to escape their accountability or excuse themselves of their evils by going over their traumas. Happens a lot. Especially, you end up with really bad guys, them bad boys, and they do all of the bad things, except they also kill pedophiles. So then that becomes their saving grace. Now you see where that song came in. It's a lot of excuses. The first story of the month is by Allison Miller. Veronica arrived, and Henry let her out to the place that he wanted her to see, setting his button-down shirt on a rock for her to sit on. Do you remember the day that it rained and we struggled to save the lumber? She nodded. Well, while looking for rocks, I found 2 frogs here. Frogs I know don't reside here naturally. She stood, coming over to the rock and looking as if she could see them. Thunder clapped overhead, and I looked away. When I looked back, I saw an Asiatic lily. My favorite flower, Veronica said. I took it as a sign to propose to you. Even after the last few weeks of hell, I still think of you in some minimalistic wedding gown with the open back, and we're on a beach somewhere. I thought it was my wife telling me it was okay to move on. Tears streamed down her face as he grabbed her arms. I never wanted anyone else. I'm in agony when I'm not with you, but I know now that it's a sign of something else. What else? She rasped. That you were not honest with me. Henry, I never lied. Taking his hands from her arms, he grabbed her head and said, You did. You lied to me. He exhaled and added, I've been lying to you too. He pulled away and she plopped down on the proffered shirt, looking back and forth. I was the one who crashed into your car that night. She stopped rocking and looked at him. I drove an old blue Chevy truck from the 80s. Your dad was in an orange Toyota. Some small piece of shit that rattled every time he rolled to a stop. He looked at her. Before you say anything, it wasn't coincidental. I planned it. I watched him almost every day since they killed my family. He would wake up, scream at you and the boy, shove you out and make you walk to school, and then lose his mind if you were even a minute late getting anywhere. He spent almost every night at the bar buying a six-pack on the way home, and I knew that he'd go to that bar that night, so I followed him. He knelt down in front of her and held her chin. I was so angry. I needed someone else to suffer as much as I did. I followed him that night, pulled off a railroad track, and waited. Through tears, she said, "You heard the whining brakes, didn't you?" I did. And I knew I had just enough time to plow through that piece of shit and end his life for good. He took his hands from her face and grabbed her arms. Squeezing tight, he continued, "I wanted to know why someone like him was granted obedient children, and I never heard my daughter, and she was taken from me." "This hurts," she said, her voice a choked whisper. Taking her face in his hands, he thumbed her earlobes and spread his fingers out along the back of her head. "I didn't know that you were in the car. I hit it hard enough to roll it, and then I intended to just speed away. But a logging truck stopped me. Once the blare of its horn subsided, I heard your voice. I pulled over, hiding my truck in the shadows, and went back to look. You called for help, weak at first, and then loud enough that I was pretty sure people would have shown up soon. I saw your fingers through the glass that had been broken out of the windshield. I went to the passenger door, cut the seatbelt, let you fall, and then I dragged you to the sidewalk. I looked around the wreckage and didn't see Rick. I assumed, since he never wore a seatbelt, he was smashed under the car. He was thrown from the car, but he walked away and left me there," she said. He took his hands off her and said, "So did I." She rose, handed him his shirt, and nodded, attempting to walk away. "Veronica," he said, grabbing her wrist. "I'm sorry. I had to tell you this." "But why? Why did you have to?" "Because I don't want you thinking I'm a hero. I wanted him dead, and I tried to kill him. I wanted to take a father from someone because he had what I didn't. And if I had let those thoughts fester inside of me any longer, I would have killed you too." She was finally afraid of him. She briskly walked away until she was on a steady ground, and then she ran, whipping the back door open and then the front. He saw it all from the spot on the hill. She fumbled with her keys, dropping them and picking them back up, and then spat mud everywhere as her tires spun the soil. She was down the hill and onto the paved road before she even made it back to the house. She screamed when she dropped the keys. Now the noise was all that filled the space, louder than the tap of rain dripping off the house, louder than the percolating coffee, even louder than his own thoughts. He needed her gone, needed her out, and he would never be strong enough to do it any other way. Still, that didn't stop him from hating himself for all of it. He had the cup to his lips when he tossed it away, shattering it on the doorframe in his kitchen. He crumbled to the ground, pulled his legs to his chest, and called out the names of the people he'd lost, rocking back and forth, saying, "Veronica, Vanessa." Placing his hands around his eyes, he screamed into his legs, screamed until he coughed, nearly choking, and then he fell to his side, wishing that he hadn't sent her away. A very strong tension in this scene, very strong characterization, very strong tension in this scene, the build up, the gentleness between him, and then just to break it all down on her. I got a feeling that this is part of one of the stories that you're either working on or is already on your page. The next story is by Mae Tanner. Imril set his bucket down and flipped over a rock. Beetles scurried away at the sudden exposure. When he chased the beetles, they spread wings and flew away. He sighed and replaced the rock and grabbed his bucket. The water inside sloshed, and he spilled some on the ground. A shrub nearby rustled, and he turned to look. The shrub scuttled toward him. Imri's eyes widened, and he stumbled backwards, spilling more water. The shrub skidded to a stop and crouched over the spilled water. After a moment, it lifted the front end and crept toward Imril, waving brown tendrils. The boy splashed the thing with water from his bucket and backed up again. More brown tendrils sprouted from the thing's front end. Fleshy green leaves covered the rest of it, and it was nearly as big as he was. The thing moved on multiple thick brown legs that resembled the tendrils sprouting from the front end. Imril turned and ran, spilling water all the way home. By the time he reached the mud hut where his family lived, the bucket was empty. He slunk inside and set the bucket beside the door. His mom turned. "Ril, did you fetch the water? You took long enough." "I tried to, but a monster attacked me and I spilled." His mother closed her eyes and sighed. If you weren't going to bring home a bucketful, why did you offer to? You insisted that you were old enough to help with the chores. I did, but there was a monster. It chased me. She wiped her hands on her apron and reached toward him. Show me your hands. He held out his hands, and she examined them. Your hands are dirty. You were just playing, weren't you? She slapped his hand. You were out wasting time. Now I'll have to fetch water myself. Tears welled in his eyes. I fell when a monster chased me and it spilled. Don't lie to me. There was no monster. You made it up. We've searched this valley and there's nothing dangerous here. She grabbed the bucket and stormed out of the hut. Imral followed her, sobbing. I didn't. I promise I didn't. There was a monster. There really was a monster. She tossed her head and stalked toward the spring. He collapsed beside the trail, weeping. Something brushed his cheek. He jerked upright. The thing crouched beside him. Its tendrils stroked his cheek. He grabbed it and struggled to his feet. The thing was lighter than he'd expected. He charged up the path toward the spring. His mother would have to believe him if he showed her the monster. I like that this was very simple, and it's a child with... The stakes are mom is disappointed, which is kind of a big deal if you're a kid. Kind of a really big deal. And clearly a piece of something bigger. But what a good introduction. What a neat introduction. And I like the little bush creature. The next story is by John Morey. It's called Glamp. It had finally happened. He had earned a seat at the table. The company of crime, the biggest supervillain organization in the world, had invited the Clamp into their ranks. All those years of breaking the law and battling heroes had paid off. Now, with proper networking, he was headed for the big time. He had dry cleaned and pressed his cyber supersuit especially for this occasion, even polishing the clamps at his belt. Clamp entered the Cox secret hideout, a 40-story tall combination castle-mad laboratory in the middle of downtown, and approached the meeting hall. He stood in awe for a moment at the huge table and all the famous supervillains populating it. People that he had read about in the newspapers, looked up to as he began his career, and now would finally get to meet. A chance to network with Atomic Brain, or the Disemboweler, or perhaps even Xavier Thanatos himself. The Clamp found his assigned seat, labeled with his name, but he frowned when he looked at the sign. My name's not Glamp, he said. They misspelled it. Hush. Another villain shushed him. Sit down. Clamp shook his head and sat down with the other candidates, staring at the misspelled name. Come on, guys. Clamp, you know, like the clamp something. You can't glamp something. Shush. Okay. A hush fell over the crowd of supervillains as Xavier Thanatos, famed mad scientist, founder of Thanatac Corp, and former president of the United States, stood lifting a glass of evil wine. Ladies, gentlemen, and astro-zombies, I declare this meeting of the Company of Crime in session. Today we have the solemn responsibility of voting to affirm 3 new candidates for membership. After this vote, they may join us, the elites of evil, the veritas of villainy, the champions of crime. A round of applause, please. Stop! That's enough. You're supposed to clap for me. Without further ado, let us get to know our new candidates. Sir, if you would please introduce yourself. Clamp began to stand before he realized that Thanatos was talking to one of the other villain candidates. A man so heavily muscled that he seemed to be carved from stone stood. The red light from his glowing eyes glinted off the Buddhist prayer beads around his neck. I am Aku Ryuji, the mountain breaker. The dark chi that I have harnessed fills my heart with killing intent and the power of the void. 10,000 warriors have fallen against my fists, and soon I shall bring down the heavens itself. Very good. You'll be a fine addition to our legion. And you, sir? An extremely skinny man wearing a blood-red clown makeup stood to his feet, cackling as he spoke. My name is the Funny Man. I shoot people and then laugh at them as they die. Xavier Thanatos chuckled. That's hilarious. He clapped as he laughed. You're perfect. These are amazing candidates. Amazing. I have high hopes for our third, Mr. Glamper. Would you introduce yourself? It's Clamp. Clamp insisted. I'm the Clamp. Well, it says here that your name is the Glamp. Xavier stated. He jingled the clamps on his belt. No, it's clamp, because I clamp things. Thanatos frowned. Then why would you call yourself Glamp? That's very strange. Anyway, who are you and what have you accomplished? I've been terrorizing Central City for the last decade, Clamp said, with the help of my clamps. Clamps? Like scissor crab claws? We already have a robot who uses those. No, like this. Clamp unhooked one of his tools. This is a clamp. You put it around their head and then start screwing it in to increase pressure. It's a really useful torture device. He became aware of the sudden silence filling the meeting hall. What? That's disgusting. Another villain stood up. It's needlessly cruel. What kind of degenerate monster are you? Clamp glared at him. Dude, you're the disemboweler. You literally disembowel people. Yeah, so? It's just slash. Guts come out dead. I don't squeeze them like an orange. You are an evil, violent monster, the electro-executioner said, shaking his signature burnt, severed head. Hey, they're just for torture. Hey, they're not just for torture. The clamp stammered. I used my clamps to break into the First Central City Bank last weekend. You robbed a bank? Penny Pincher asked. That'll raise interest rates on those poor customers. You're despicable. Banks don't work that way. Even I, Count Drakenstein, who was created by a mad scientist stitching together the bodies of famous vampires, thinks that this is wrong. That's not how any of this works. Mr. Glamp, don't be rude, Thanatos said. We're supervillains, not jerks. I've done other stuff too, Clamp said. One time I kidnapped the president's son and held him ransom. What? Pied Piper shouted. He's a child. Children are off limits. That's horrendously un-American, Sir Reginald of Buckingham, the Black Knight stated. We're patriots. I don't think that you'll fit in very well in the cock. He has a point, Xavier Thanatos said with a shake of his head. I'm afraid that you aren't right for our organization. I'm not right for your organization? Are you kidding me? I've been doing this for 10 years. I fight Vortex almost every week. So it's your fault that he is late to our hero-villain dates? Felicia Raziria asked as she purred. I hate you already. Mr. Glamp, I'm afraid that you have to leave, Thanatos stated. You aren't a good fit here. You are too violent, the Mountain Breaker said with a shake of his head. Yeah, man, you need to learn some restraint, the funny man agreed. Clamp tensed, squeezing the C-clamp in his hand until his knuckles turned white. Fine, whatever. I don't need any of you. I'll start my own evil organization, and then you'll be sorry. Xavier Thanatos scowled. That's a copyright infringement. You'll never get away with this. Unleash the lawyers. Turns out the old saying was true. Never meet your villains. You cheeky man. Also, it's okay. You can try again, Clamp. They got you down as Glamp. You can literally try again. I don't think that they will know any better. The question is, do you really want to try any better? Do you want to try something different? Like, it may not be worth it. Though, if you could make your own organization, like you said, and just not use their things. It's not a trademark infringement if you don't call it the cock. You can call it the Badass League of Lucifer's Servants. Or in other words, balls. Compete on their level. You got this. The next story is by Egao Chan, called Baker Zero. Day of Lightness, 3/14/2835. Era of the Fallen World. The flowery, crusty scourge had rampaged through the world. There was no saving everyone. The only thing possible was vengeance and holding that first Baker accountable. Alpha Team, what's your position? A middle-aged male voice came from the radio. All enemies cleared. Closing in on inner compound. Tyler responded with a suppressed voice. How does it look outside? No disturbance, the voice responded. Proceed. Be careful. The floor of the compound was littered with white dust. The ground was not entirely solid, but somehow bouncy. If anyone stepped harder, it would even crack. Dough. The entire inner compound was made of dough and crust. The white dust was just flour. It was everywhere, even in the air. This was the reason that they could only bring non-firearms. Any spark of bright fire could light an explosion that would end everyone present. Clear. Clear. Sonic blast device deployed. The other team members had secured the other entrance and exits to this place. Lieutenant, we're ready. Alpha team in position. Ready to unveil Baker Zero, Tyler reported through the radio. The door was made of thick crust, and the locks were made of dried noodles, spaghetti or bucatini. Tyler could not tell. It did not matter either way, for it was only a pineapple concentrate spray and one forceful kick away from being reduced to a sticky, non-hindering mess. Boom! The thick lasagna-like door was down with just one kick. Tyler and his second-hand man, Kim, charged in with their hand crossbows and pineapple concentrate packet launchers held high. Down on the ground! Down on the ground! Tyler roared at the top of his lungs. You're under arrest, Baker Zero! Two tall men, completely made of dough and wielding dough battle axes, tried to attack Tyler and Kim, but their entire upper bodies were blasted into wet pieces of dough on the ground by pineapple concentrate. All right there, Baker Zero! Kim turned his hand crossbow at the masked and cloaked figure standing behind the experimental table. Raise your hands and take off your mask slowly. Now! The masked figure raised his two short arms and took off his mask. The gloves each had 5 fingers, but somehow he used only 2 on each hand. The mask fell. It was not a mad scientist. No crazy hair, no thick glasses. The head was bald, but not from hair loss. The hair was bald, not from hair loss, but from its own reasons. Baker Zero was a crab. Its mouth parts were vibrating, making a chittering noise. Please, don't shoot, the crab let out a man's voice with some kind of stereotypical Asian accent. I make bread and pizza here. Me no guilty. What the fuck? Kim turned to face Tyler. A crab that talks? What? How? Tyler searched through his memories before something shot into his mind. Egao, the crust maker. I thought you were dead. Kim's fingers on the trigger tightened. He even pointed the pineapple concentrate launcher at the crab. It was unexpected, but not a huge surprise. The reclaimed records from the fallen Illuminati facility mentioned it. Apparently, the one who crafted the dolmen recipes, dozens of them, all in different uses and textures, using only human flour, water, and spices. Drop the act, Egao. Illuminati agents recorded full and fluent conversations with you. You are not fooling anyone. Tyler landed a bolt on the table in front of the crab before reloading. Are you ready to pay for what you've done? No, me no understand. Me poor crab making pasta. Me afraid. The crab's mouth began foaming. Its arms were shaking. Drop the fucking act, you fucking seafood, Tyler barked. How the hell did you survive? And tell us how to undo the dough scourge. Kim tried to calm the situation down a bit. You were the first recipe maker. You must know how to stop the multiplication of these dough men. The crab's face dimmed. Then it sighed. Neither Tyler nor Kim knew how the crabman did what he just did. All right. Please, humans. The crab laid back on its chair, took a breadstick from the table and started chewing it. Its accent lessened. There was still some lingering, but it was less offensive and cartoony. Killing me won't save anyone. There's no undoing it. They have mastered how to multiply already. Tyler fired his hand crossbow and knocked off the crab's left arm. The crab squirmed for a brief moment, but instantly settled down. You know, many did that to me before. The crab's voice was hoarse, yet still calm. They took my arm, tossed me back into the water, then sold it to some bozo who can't even make a stew. This doesn't even hurt anymore. Why are you making more dough men? Kim asked. Even his hands were trembling. Do you know how hard it is to be a crab in a human-dominated world? The crab picked up another breadstick. Do you know how much crab you humans eat each year? How many crabs lose their arms each year? How many of us die from your lotions and ointments? No, and I don't care. Tyler shot off the crab's remaining arm. Tell us anything that you know on stopping the Doman or how to combat them effectively, or we won't mind having a crab stew tonight. Crab sighed before raising his two eyes at Tyler. Do it now! Sudden and debilitating itchiness struck both of them at the crotch. They lost grip of their weapons and dropped to the ground, kicking and scratching. The crab hopped from the booster seat and out of his faux coat, scurrying into the shadows of the compound. Why don't you try marinara, you monkeys? The crab's voice resounded in the dough compound. I see the battle with the Crabman and the Doughboys continues. We must stop this crab from the complete and utter destruction of our society as we know it, controlled by the crab kind. I can't believe this is happening. How could he possibly keep getting away with it? And guys, if we don't see an end to the Crabman sometime soon, we all might be enslaved by the Pillsbury Doughboy. The next story is Egao Chan. I look forward to the next installment. The next story is by Worlds of Woe. How many weapons were made for the Salem War? That's an interesting question. Am I expected to count every ship and metal pole used as weapons? Yes, every type. We've collected about 12,473,490 weapons total in the categories of small arms, explosive, high artillery, exoskeletons, makeshift weaponry, sudden destruction infrastructure, and weapons of mass destruction. If you feel the answer needs more time for discovery, you may ask for time to count and ask for any amount of securities that we can give your needs. Yes, I need more time. I will come up with a far more specific list of all the weapons that I actually worked on. Makeshift weaponry is a category that I can't credit for my genius alone. Of course, please have a list by the next gathering for trial. As you know, there are concerns that after the war, a few of your weapons have not been fully accounted for. We fear that may have been stolen by pirates, unsuspecting civilians, or taken by foreign entities. Like this organization? No, we mean to disarm your weapons and properly dispose of them. Our entities would likely misuse these weapons in methods that are dangerous to themselves and others. No, but you could put them to good use, killing all the new pirates. Please refrain from stating explicit political opinions during the trial. Now, as the grand weapons handler of the king, was it, or was it not your job to handle the development and export of weapons across the free nations of Salem? Yes. I was the lead weapons developer and exporter. I oversaw all aspects. Why were you specifically chosen for the job? My expertise in developing weapons started when I was a young boy. Pirates attacked my village, and working with local militia groups that was founded. We managed to beat them back with clever weapons, but when the Pirate King arrived, he absorbed our entire nation. An intelligence test was given out to all of us to see who had greater abilities of learning. I excelled and was immediately rushed into the sciences when I was pigeonholed into industry, robots, and eventual development, and the development of weapons for which I was given a scholarship. I continued my work till I became a pivotal member of the Pirate King's state. Please refrain from referring to the free nations of Salem as the Pirate King's state. Yeah, the free nation. I learned that my superiors were spies for your government, purposefully trying to weaken the state. And I knew this after being recruited as a spy and telling the proper authorities in which I was promoted. With such intimate knowledge of the development of these weapons, how they could be used, where they would be going, and what they were used for, I did not know what they were used for. Can you repeat that? You did not know what they were used for? No. You did not know what the weapons of mass destruction were used for? No. You did not know what the exoskeletons, explosives, sudden destructive infrastructure, sidearms, and other explicit weapons with manuals would be used for? No. The court has a hard time understanding, considering your close relationship with the Pirate King. We took pictures together and had private conversations on the development of new weapons, and conversations on strategy. One of the pictures shows you during an active war room meeting. If I knew the Pirate King's true plans, I wouldn't be here. Where would you be? Wherever the Pirate King is now, you never actually found him. Your nation suffered a great tragedy from him, but we didn't know his plan included blowing up an empire's capital. If we all knew that his real plan was to burn the fucking world, do you think that I would have let my wife and kids stay in the capital and continue to work for him? That's beyond the scope of my question. This court holds you in contempt as we believe that you did know what the weapons would be used for, and instead of making a morally conscious act of inaction in minimizing your role, instead, you increased production by 200%, made weapons more effective, and continued research for new methods of killing your fellow man. Sudden destructive infrastructure is likely on that list of the weapons, isn't it? I will constantly appeal for its removal, especially now in its ruinous age of reconstruction that the Pirate King has banished us to. It was used to build military bases in the second, but it can be used to rebuild houses. The court has decided your fate is in the matter of developing these weapons, not for their future use. You've deliberately destroyed the records of the scientists who helped you. You have withheld documentation of your exports and imports, hid schematics of weaponry, halting disarmament, and have worked against the courts to ease the minds of both citizens of our state and yours. This deserves the death penalty, and we demand that you acknowledge your part and play in this war and give us information. I'm not gonna give you my friends to slaughter. They have sons and daughters. Respectfully, so did all the civilians murdered by your weapons. An eye for an eye? No, an eye for information. A deal can be struck if you can give us the coordinates of one weapon developed in your care. It's been noted in classified documents that you developed a weapon. It was used to eviscerate the capital. You don't have the dose? No. We demand to know its location during the meeting. If you can't find it in my laboratory, the Pirate King has it. But why? But why? I mean, you're friends, so there is that. There is absolutely that. That was also a lot of weapons in the Salem War, sir. I don't think that you're getting out of this very easily. I'm sorry. It's probably a bit of a doom culture right now. The next story is by Mike Vanhoose. I felt the soft down encircling me well before I opened my eyes. The softest bed I'd ever slept on urged me to keep still and hope for more sleep, knowing that it would not come. Cool pillows cradled me, only allowing for the slightest movement of my head to either side. After a night of dreamless sleep, this was the perfect wake-up, except for the fact that I wasn't in my bed, and I couldn't move. Somehow my legs and arms were tied with the soft fabric. Silk, perhaps. The realization spurred my heavy eyes to full waking mode. My heart skipped, raced, then skipped again. I scanned the room for whatever clues it would give me as to my whereabouts. Opulent, even gaudy tapestry hung from the walls and windows, blanketed out any sunlight. Blistering white paint covered what wall space I could see, while faint techno music played from somewhere outside. More unsettling than my surroundings was the man at the foot of the bed, more feminine than any old girlfriend's. Draped in a long sheer robe, he swayed around the room in a burlesque fashion, his pasty pale complexion blended with his white surroundings. "Good morning, Mike. Did you enjoy your sleep?" His voice was a screech owl or a songbird. Both fit the bill. My thick tongue felt like sandpaper. My head pounded. I barely spoke. "Where am I?" "You're in Louisville, sugar. My guest last night." Shaking more sleep from my brain, I questioned him as well as I could. "Louisville? I live 3 hours away. How did I get to Louisville?" Trying to sit, I was reminded of the ties that bound me to the bed. I managed to find my voice. "And why the hell am I tied up? And who the hell are you?" "Easy, Mike. This'll be quick. I'm Court Summerall. You're in my home. The restraints are..." He sounded amused. "Necessary." Before I saw him move, he was straddling me in the bed. His face was a whisper away from mine. He was wearing lipstick and eyeliner. "Look, Court, whatever might have happened, people will be looking for me." He giggled. The sound reminded me of one of my daughters looking at a cute boy. "Oh, sweetie, you really don't have a clue, do you?" "Let me enlighten you." As quick as he was on me, he was standing beside the door, opening it. A tall blonde, dressed in a nightie, walked into the room. Her eyes were as crystal blue as the Caribbean waters that I'd seen. This is Casey. She has brought a suit against you. A suit. What are you talking about? Casey spoke. Her voice was cold. Last year, you killed a vampire. He was my creator. I remember the event clearly. It was balmy day. We found the crypt under an old sawmill. Vampires were not yet protected. It was justified. Your creator killed my friend. Yes, sweetie, he did. And seeing as how there was a moratorium on killing humans, the Vampire Council of Kentucky voted to carry out sanctions on him. It was unanimous. I voted myself. I remembered hearing something on the news about vampires voting to feed on live human blood. Volunteers flocked to the blood banks to donate, but in the vampire world, that was the equivalent of McDonald's. Sometimes you want a home-cooked meal. Casey glared at me. Her blue eyes raged with retribution. Humans were told to keep hands off our kind. Court laughed. Easy, Casey. Let Mike defend himself. He has that right. Turning to me, Court's frilly tone changed to a slate harder tenor. Tell us, Mike. Why did you kill a vampire? I could feel my heart racing. Every beat felt like it was penetrating my chest. I told you, he killed a friend of mine. We were afraid. Casey stepped in again. This time her eyes were black. Afraid of what? That we'd kill more of you? We sanctioned our kind. It's not up to humans to dish out vampire punishment. I looked to Court, who nodded. I'm afraid Casey is correct, Mike. We meet our own punishments. A small grain of indignation roiled through me. Yeah? Really, Court? You deal with vamps on your... His slap against me knocked me out. We'll not use pejorative slurs in here, Mike. Remember that. As the fog cleared from my mind, I tried to make sense of it all. Why? Why would you have done it? What would you have done to... I'm sorry. What was his name? Casey's hands gripped my throat like a vice. I felt muscles in my neck strain and pull against her strangling hold. Court jumped atop Casey. Enough! Tossing her aside like a scrap. Casey hit the blank white wall adjacent to the bed I was tied to. I wasn't sorry to see that. Court returned to his feminine cooing and answered my question. His name was Tobias Creech. He was the fourth oldest vampire in Kentucky. He'd been a friend of mine for 150 years. It was a great sadness that I voted for his sanctions. Our sanctions are severe, Mike. Entombment for 500 years. Most of us haven't even been around that long. Only a few make as long as I have. But I digress. After the 500 years have passed, a vampire would be feeble and insane. Tobias would have been dug up and placed in an open field to be killed by sunlight. Those are our sanctions, and Tobias would have been taken into vampire custody if you hadn't killed him. So now, I ask again, and for the last time, why did you kill my friend and save the pale excuse that he killed one of your kind? I shook. The sudden realization that I would die in a bed overcame me. No words? Fine. Casey? Court looked at Casey, who recovered from her battering. Her eyes had changed colors again. This time they were a deep crimson. I don't think we've had our breakfast yet. Is Casey the Taylor Swift from the last story? Is this a continuation from the last story? Are we having continuation month? Also, yeah, never get yourself, if you're a human, never get yourself involved with the business of vampires. Like, they don't play games. They don't play nice. They don't play well with humans, thinking that they are on the same level playing field, because yeah, you're not. Everywhere you go, you will see the vampires have their own rule of law, and that is not determined by anything humans can do. Sorry, Mike, I think you're about to die. The next story is by triGRIMM. The sanguine sand dribbled through my fingers like granulated blood, reeking of death and despair. Impressions in the rough grains rippled outward in gruesome artistry, remnants of a frantic struggle painted by murderous intent. I knelt within the center of this vicious tableau, the weeping of the sands drowning out my own tears, my hands stained red. I stared down at them in confusion, worried the ichor might be my own, even more concerned that it might not be. How did this happen? I tried focusing past the last few months, but a persistent shrill nauseated my mind like a needled whisper piercing my eyes. Involuntarily, I vomited aside, wiping the spew away with gore-soaked hands. My clothes were torn asunder, filthy scraps of coarse linen patchworked by cheap repairs. My body was battered, hair stringy and lank, my limbs malnourished, yellowed nails poking from cracked skin parched of life. They came upon me this way. A retching wretch of a man knelt within an opulence of offal. My vision still troubled. The trio coalesced from its shadowed fringe, coming forth as a judgment of three. I must have looked a troubled soul, a victim of dark deed. The first was a tailor's wife, high-swept cheekbones and a beak-shaped nose outlining her comely face. Although seemingly made of a sturdy, comfortable material, her plain blue dress was ripped in a couple of places. She had full, down-turned lips, etched in livid disapproval, and sharp nails on a pointed finger straight at me. He did it! I shook my head immediately in denial. The fresh scratches on my cheeks inflamed with embarrassment. I couldn't have done something bad, could I? But my voice was still weak. My mind was wild and disoriented. I'm a good person. What exactly was she accusing me of? The second stepped forth, solidifying into a top-hatted gentleman advanced in years. A large white drooping mustache hid a weak chin, but sharp brown eyes, cut knowingly behind clear spectacles. I, too, saw he did it, shaking his head in disgust. The old man was mad. He looked down upon me like a lowly insect, contempt oozing from his every pore. How dare he? How far could one old man with glasses possibly see? I yelled back with the pronounced jabs of my fist, which seemed to grow bloodier with emphasis. It wasn't me, and it couldn't be. Look at me! Grasping what little grimy clothes I had left. I'm a victim as much as he or she. The third came bursting forth with a decisive stomp, baton in hand. He sported a blue uniform, buttoned up the sides, and shrilled on a whistle which hurt my ears. I covered my head reflexively, shutting my eyes and clamping my ears to mute out the pain. The third came closer, relentless, the whistle rising in ear-splitting intensity, increasingly accusatory with every step. I ran as far as I could, the screeching following doggedly like a pursuer from hell. I ran until I could run no more, the sand finally trapping me within the wallowing furrows, sapping the last of my stamina. The whistling pain became utterly overwhelming, and I lashed out, protecting myself from the unabating assault. In answer, I felt an explosion on my left rib and heard the distinctive cracking sound of my vision threatened to blacken out. I instinctively grabbed the baton, ripping it into my own hands. Despite how slick they were, I whipped it overhead and brought it down over and over again until I heard faint patters land close behind me in the sand, wetting the grains again. The hard wooden grip was covered in sticky red pulp, and I couldn't bear to look upon the rest, dropping it quickly into the innards mess. My body succumbed to the agony, and I knelt within the middle of the raw sand, raking my fingers through its granulated misery until the shrilling dropped a whisper and then a murmur and stopped. I breathed in slowly, expecting torturous pain, but exhaled in vivid relief. I was okay. My ears no longer hurt, and my vision seemed more focused. I looked down at the sanguine sands dripping through my dark, stained hands and wondered at its impressions. Well, this man do seem like a tortured soul. Why he a tortured soul? I'm not entirely sure. What he do? I don't think he even entirely knows what he done. But he do sound a bit like a tortured man. And he using a lot of fancy, elevated language to express the torture. I would definitely say triGRIMM. As in, like, 3 times as sad. Try as in 3. The next story is by Olivia Friesen, also named Oh, This Chapter. The entire ship sails in a somber haze. I've counted our numbers, counted again. I'm convinced that if I count enough times, I'll discover that I've made a mistake or maybe missed someone, and now our numbers will be higher. But each time, and it is many times, it stays the same, over and over. We lost Krieger halfway back to the ship. The injuries he sustained proved more severe than he let anyone know, refusing to let us help with his bandages. The way he fell silent like a tree, secretly letting go of its last leaf. I couldn't help but cry as I held his hand and watched his chest slow to a stop. It took the men 2 days of hard rowing to make it to the shores in time to catch the end drift of war and lead the lambs that I brought back to me to slaughter. Going back, it's taken us 5. But I will not command speed. The only thing that I can give them right now is time to process what they've been through, what they've lost. We've all taken turns, and for once I'm grateful for Taryn forcing stretches of exercise upon us daily. My hands are calloused beyond any that I've had before, and my shoulders ache constant, even just standing. But the time at the oar gives my mind freedom to wander, and wander at the utter stupidity of my decisions to go, which is the worst of it all. What were we thinking that such a small army, but which is laughable since we were but 2,001 with Cien, could make any effect at all? I say we in the selfish way one wants to convince themselves it's a blame to be shared. Maybe it is, as they chose with their own free will to join me. But I took the first step in getting us all to this point in tattered history, that for all the generations to come, my blood-stained handprint was an insignia stating me as the participant of such horror. A hollow laugh echoes in my insides, rattling around my ribcage. I'm becoming even more aware of. The selfish streak runs through me still, thinking the deeds that I've done are worthy of remembrance, maybe as a lesson, a reminder of how not to bring peace. The basalt columns have lost their shroud of mystery. No fog blankets their peaks, and now more clearly I can make out smudges of white against the near indecipherable staircase I now know wind along up them. They are there, watching, preparing their song. It comes then, a whoosh through the air, full of sorrow and disbelief. For so long, Valdari has existed on the fringes of peace, choosing to ignore the unsettled amongst their ranks and keep to themselves. For so long, the only songs brought forth were welcome or warning. Rarely did a ship have cause to careen into the depth, and even rarer did a song of utter devastation come from their lips. It came when they realized the symbolisms of the ring on their hand, and when they had acknowledged Greer would not be returning, but bled into the melody of wonder and celebration. Now, the air weeps with their grief. We glide like ghosts on the water, but more so, we are but faint delusions of who we were when we left. Gone is any eager anticipation to take what was ours. Dissipated is the belief a gathering so small could contribute to a war so big. Even the drumming of my heartbeat is dulled, so faint that I have to fit my hand under my furs to even find where my heart lays. The black of the shores is coming into focus, and I can see a handful of shapes lining the water's edge. The foam sizzles under their boots as we plow even closer. I can sense it, feel it in my bones about who it is that stands waiting. It rolls over me as if I'm nothing but lightweight driftwood upon the wild sea. Her screams pierce the air, stronger than the storm, sharper than a dagger. The Saussure are silenced, the albatross hushed. Even the waves have dulled their noisy cascades, stilled by the agony ripping through the space between her and the ship, between us. I would sooner wish death for myself than to hear such pain again. The ship careened into the shore, the men having rowed it so ferociously that they missed the dock altogether. So deep is their grief, not only at the loss of their comrades, but the youngest child when children are so few. The force shoves us all forward, and I catch the railing to stop myself from falling over. He stands, no, now fallen, clutching the black grains of sand as if they still root her and save her from the reality facing her. We've come bearing her child's lifeless body, a pitiful small bundle made even smaller by the 2 men who carried the litter, making their way to her. How do I offer sympathy to a woman whose daughter I swore an oath to, found to have fallen void? For what can compare to a mother's sorrow? I wished desperately for a hand to hold and squeeze, anchor me in the grief crashing over me, but my fingers find cold air. Arlo told me there was strength in me that I had yet to recognize in myself, and now was the time to dig deep into myself and rely on it. I reign as Drottning, and no one else can walk me through, nor carry this burden but me. Heavy is the crown on the brow of those with the biggest responsibilities, for the Drottning's duty is first for her people. The men carrying Cien's body have made it within feet of her mother, their backs ramrod straight. I don't see their faces, but I know from what I saw on the ship their composure hangs like a badly frayed tapestry thread. How much longer they can hold on to their emotions, I don't know. Were this the Iswal court, I would knight them both for their bravery. No one wants to face the mother of a murdered child, yet these two volunteered. I will be grateful for them until the ends of my days and beyond. I know I must step forward, my trepidation like when I first landed on these sands. With a deep breath and lifting my chin, I follow where they walked, and all too shortly found myself only a few yards from Sien's family. Her father and brother offered me a bow. I wish that I could tell them it's unnecessary in the moments like this. Tears stained both of their faces, the light dulled on their eyes. I'm again taken aback by how similar Sien and her brother are in appearance. Sien's father is one of the Lagalustanders, or song listeners, able to discern the vocalization of the Sulchur. What horror their song brought today. Behind them, no one else gathers, but all have paused their daily lives, faces, seeing and realizing what was happened, what lie under the canvas on a litter. Slowly, wails go up, blending with the sorrowful weeping of the women kneeling before me. The Drottning's duty is first to her people, to be an example of strength and stoic. That is what Ragnar told me Ophelia believed in, to her core. But a Drottning cannot be removed from the pain of her people, that she doesn't allow herself to grieve with them. These are my people. Sien was my people. Arlo was my person. I will not remove myself from the pain subjected to those around me. I am my mother's daughter, but also I am myself. I am their Drottning, and I will grieve with and for them. This feels like, it feels it feels kind of diminutive to say it feels like a life-changing moment for this character in this story. Maybe it's leading into what will be the next arc, or maybe it's an inciting incident in the beginning. It could be either. But this character is obviously important, and obviously a leader of some kind to the people around her. Also kind of a warrior, and a major thing is happening with her people. This definitely feels like it's not a self-contained piece, but rather an impactful moment in a much larger piece. The next story is by Vladimir Novitski, called The First Mercy. Under the foundation of the world it lies, upon the heavens it rests, that which hears no prayers, that which speaks no prophecy. Older than the earth and the time, older than the sun and the moon, the boundless origin, that which lies without sleep, its domain is the unseen and the unheard, the yet unshaped and the never born. In the beginning, there was only it, and so there was nothing at all, and with that it was content. Yet, after the end of the new beginning always comes, and every beginning must come to an end. And so, out of that which lies without sleep, a new one stepped out, so nothing was everything no more, and something had begun. The new one sang, and it was the first song, and so out of the depths gray earth rose, bearing metals and gems, and the fire within, for the song was a call, and the earth was the answer. The first singer stood on the earth, and it became rich and fruitful, wet and black. Again and again the singer would step, and the steps became a dance, and it was the first dance. And so the earth gave birth to the trees and the grasses and all manners of plants without measure, for the dance was a call, and the plants were the answer. The first dancer saw that, and was glad, and laughed, and it was the first laugh. And so flocks of birds rose, fluttering above the earth. Beasts came running upon it, and all manners of creeping things slithered under the roots and the rocks, for the laughter was a call, and the creatures of the earth were the answer. Tired, the first mirthful became, and on the soft grasses lay down and slept, and it was the first slumber. And so the winds flew across the sky, and rivers carved the earth to make their way, for the slumber was also a call, and the currents and the flows were the answer. Woke up the first sleeper and became frightened, for a dark shadow was standing above, watching. The shadow was not of the earth, nor the plants, nor the beasts, and of the currents it was neither. And so it was not of the sleeper at all, and the fear of the sleeper fled from the shadows, and it was the first fear. And so out of the earth's rocky peaks rose a fiery mountain, and with deep fissures and caverns the earth was scattered. For even the fear was a call, and far places of hiding were the answer. Across the world the shadow chased the first frightened, and in the end at the bottom of the deep cavern cornered her. I am an emissary of nothing, the shadow spoke, and those were the first words It groaned and strained under the ruckus of creation, its endless rest disturbed of crime, of being. In the void that is not, I accuse you. What have you to say for yourself? Thus spoke the first speaker, and held aloft his dreadful scythe of darkness. Tell me, O shadow, that I cast upon myself by being in the void that is not. Is my crime truly such a terrible one? Spoke the first frightened. Are you not a criminal, same as I? Do you not tread upon nothing's rest, joined with me in being? Silent was the first speaker, but in his hand his wicked sword of darkness trembled, for there was truth in those words. Then the first sleeper took the speaker's hand in hers and led her to the surface. Look, she said, look at the bountiful earth, and the trees, and the soft grasses, and the beasts running wild. Look at the winds herding clouds in the skies, hearing the rivers singing and roaring. Look at the mountains reaching high in the deep, dark caverns. It is not beautiful. Is it not beautiful, this creation of mine? Is it not worth of being? Silent was the first speaker, but his cruel dagger of darkness he did lower, for there was truth in those words. Then the first mirthful turned to the speaker, a gentle hand on his cheek placed. Strike me down and unmake me, O destroyer, if that is your wish, she said. Bring the being back to naught, and to the void return, emissary of nothing. The briefest spell of life I had will have been worth the agony of my unmaking. Silent was the first speaker, but his humble pruning knife of darkness he sheathed, and that was the first mercy. Let me know your name, so that I can know you, said the first merciful. Name, the first dancer replied. I do not know my name, I only know myself for my song. Do you know yours? No, the first merciful said, perplexed. I only know myself for your songs as well. Then, if we are to know each other, our names we must acquire, laughed the first singer. Shall you give my name to me, and in turn I could give you yours? Long thought the first merciful, and in the end spoke. I name you Develi. Develi bare of foot, Develi green of fingers, Develi the singer. What do you name me? With joy spoke Develi. I name you Inra. Inra heavy of hand, Inra red of heart, Inra the speaker. And so Inra and Develi saw each other, as if for the first time illuminated, and knew each other. Where Inra was pale and clad in shadows, Develi was dark and wrapped in warm light. Opposite they were, but in their naming part of one whole. The first named embrace each other as they did, and were glad to have found each other in being. 11 brothers I have in the void, said Inra. Each one, as I, a destroyer. Yet to come to be, they slumber in nothing, waiting to do its bidding. My dear Develi, your creation knows no bounds, ever multiplying it is, ruckus and bustling. That which lies without sleep shall not endure the strain of it for long. Soon those brothers of mine shall come, seeking our unmasking. Let me be the boundary of creation, its measures and orders, so nothing would lie in peace and being could continue. Let it be so, Develi replied, and so it was. His pruning knife Inra unsheathed, and once more set to work. Deep within the forest he found a lone wolf, and with his knife sliced a measure of hunger and cruelty from it, and so the wolf became a tame dog. Then he found a hare, and with a knife sliced a measure of cunning and deftness from it, and so the hare became the meek rabbit. With shadows he bound the hunger and the cunning and the cruelty and the deftness, and shaped a new beast from it, ravenous and unruly, by a chain of darkness to Inra's left hand bound. You, he said to the beast, shall be our peace with nothing, the world negating. Each thing from now shall have its measure of being, to be cut off by my hand when the time comes. The cuttings are yours to consume and return to nothing. Thus, I name you the devourer. The beast licked its lips with its forked tongue and squinted its blood-red eyes at the light of creation. So be it. There are two things that this makes me think. Number one, a creation story, which a lot of the works that I've seen from you, Vladimir, have been a creation style story. Very good in like an illustrated picture book of some kind, an illustrated folklore book. And then two, this one very specifically makes me think of the origin of the sky. It has a very similar vibe. Like, they're not exactly written the same in any way, but it has a similar vibe of that folklore. And also that story has the sky and the mountain personifying and then giving each other names. if I remember it correctly. If it wasn't giving each other names, it was the mountain that gave them all names because the lake invited her to. That's I think what actually really makes me think of it. It is the folklore style as well, and would feel like it at home in a collection kind of like that. And a collection of story, and I call that a collection of story because that intermixed the story of the lake and the mountain and the baby going to the origin of the sky, as well as mixtures of folklore of that destroyed world. The next story is by Ben Hayward. They tell me that I killed my wife in a fit of blind rage. I had no alibi, no sworn witness testimony. I was not home when it happened. I hadn't been home in months. The motive was revenge for taking my house, my kids. On paper, it makes perfect sense. I had been seen in the area the night that she was killed, picking up groceries. I drove past the house and saw the lights on, but not a sign of movement. You own firearms, don't you, Mr. Daniels? The interrogator asked. That's correct, but I remember the rain beating against the car windows in waves. As I parked the car opposite side of the street, I watched for hours until after 1 a.m. This weapon belongs to you, doesn't it? Yeah, it does, officer. I could feel my throat clench. Where do you keep this weapon? It's sealed. I pause and collect myself for a second. It's supposed to be sealed in a weapons rack in the basement. Well, quite clearly it's not. My eyes were glazed over, trapped by invisible cataract, lying on the floor in a pool of dried blood. A bullet hole in our sternum. Time slowed to a near standstill. I stood there, taking in the horror, unable to move. Where are my children? I asked. They've been taken somewhere safe, she replied. Are they with their grandparents? No, they're somewhere safe, she replied, brooking no argument. Her skin was cold. I checked her pulse. Nothing before tearfully calling the police that something bad had happened. The police had almost immediately arrested me, taken me in, and taken me to the station. The interrogator came in, bleary-eyed, smelling faintly of stale cigarettes. Can anyone point to your whereabouts at 8 p.m. that night? She asked, sipping the mug of coffee. No, I was on my own. The interrogator switched off the tape recorder, pressing her fingers firmly into her templates. We're going to put you away for a long time, Mr. Daniels. I didn't do it. I found the body. I reported it. Well, quite frankly, you were supposed to be there. What? They're young enough that they'll forget about the two of you. She finished her cup of coffee. It would be such a waste having the two of you as parents. They're very gifted. She collected herself, smiled slightly. It's nothing personal, but we have to think of the future. And with that, she left the room, the tape in hand. Well, we got a conspiracy going on here. The kid's taken away by these bad cops. Excuse me? That's what it sounds like to me. And the feds freaking ready to throw somebody in jail for something, and the feds ready to murder somebody in order to take kids away and frame somebody else. Those kids better be freaking special. This is how secret weapons, they're gonna freaking MK Ultra. They're gonna MK Ultra those kids. The next story is by Machined Hearts, formerly Anonymous. Jason sat on the beach, downing another bottle of cheap whiskey as he reminisced about his love, Cindy. It'd been 6 years since she passed, but every day to Jason felt like she died only the day before. As he chugged the last fifth of the bottle, a bit of alcohol splashed across his face as his lips retreated from the rim. Suddenly, the memory of being there with her as she died washed away the sunset over the shoreline. He held Cindy in his arms. She was bleeding from the gunshot wound to the stomach over a matter of $25, her beat-up cell phone, and a knockoff purse. The robber disappeared into the night, never to be found again. The sobs and cries as the light faded from her eyes were burned into his head. A wretched video played on loop every moment of every day. Suddenly, the tap of Billy Club on his shoulder jolted him from the flashback. No open containers on the beach, the cop said. I'm gonna need to see some identification. The words ignited his sorrows to fury like a circus fire swallower blowing flame into a room of dry gunpowder. They did nothing. Months and months of hope, and the authorities dropped the case. Justice for Cindy was too much, but an empty damn bottle was perfect low-hanging fruit for these snakes. Without another word, Jason stumbled to his feet and rushed to the officer. With a swift club to the head, it staggered him, and the officer got out of the way. His partner drew his pistol. The strike sent Jason off balance and did nothing to chill his rage. Whipping his shoulders and throwing his free leg over the other, Jason twisted himself and diverted his momentum. With a few steps, he stumbled forward and reached. His hands landed on the cold polymer of the nightstick cop's holstered gun. Behind, the thunderous shots rang out. 3 landed square in Jason's back. His legs buckled under him, and he fell flat on his face against the sidewalk. He grew cold, unable to rise, while he drowned in his own blood. But a warmth embraced him, and the thought of going out like Cindy would somehow bring them back together again. As everything faded around him, he hoped that she wouldn't be too mad at him for how things had turned out. Jason's eyes shot open, and a harsh tone filled the space around him. A cold, feminine, robotic voice echoed out over the loudspeaker nearby. Prisoner 4602178, consecutive life sentence, 47 complete. Checking, next incineration phase. Parole status denied. Checking next incarceration phase. Parole status denied. Continuing penal cycle. His eyes hurt, and his mouth was filled with a hose piped down into his esophagus. A pair of straws filled his nostrils, and a machine outside of his teardrop pod dictated his breathing pace. He couldn't move anything but his eyes. He couldn't even feel a translucent sludge his body was suspended in. What did he do to get here? As he gurgled ineffectually, trying to cry out, the feminine robot voice spoke again. Preparation complete. Rehabilitation program 9 commencing. A blinding light washed over his eyes. Cindy puffed a cloud of steam into the cold winter's air, washing away the memory of the prison. I'm a dragon, Jason. Give me your booty. She giggled and pulled him closer as they strolled through the park, a spontaneous evening out. A shifting shadow caught Jason's eyes, and a hooded figure emerged beneath a streetlight up ahead. Ooh, we're getting into some prison punishment. Whether it's justified or not, it looks like some dystopian difficulties going on up in there. My guy, I hope you find a way to escape at some point. Because living through repeats of like some of your worst moments ever, not fun. Not fun. The last story of the month is by R.S. Alessi. When Kat woke from her afternoon nap, she was not in a state that she'd been in when she closed her eyes. Front and rear paws were bound in twine. Around her, all the residents of the backyard had gathered. Creepy crawlies, slithering and scampering critters, and flapping, squawking birds. There was nothing to do but see what they wanted. Good afternoon, my neighbors, the cat purred. I see that I am the guest of honor at this party, but I am at a disadvantage. Might you tell me what the special occasion is? Mockingbird hopped from the fence to branch to lawn, landing scant few feet from the cat's face. In an even trill, she said, You have been captured. Now you will stand trial for your crimes against us. Oh? Kat turned her head and blinked lazily at each of the creatures around her. A circus had appeared for the event. Ants and caterpillars and spiders, lizards and snakes and frogs, squirrels and mice, and even a sleepy opossum. In the trees above crowded stately cardinals, raucous blue jays, imperious woodpeckers, and timid sparrows. Have I truly wronged all of you? The resounding yes was deafening. Well then, Kat rolled onto her belly and drew her bound paws beneath her. She hadn't failed to notice that the lashings were poorly tied. Little wonder. Good knot work is difficult without opposable thumbs. Who is first to accuse me? I am running this trial, the mockingbird cawed. Since you have failed to land any of the winged creatures of the sky, not for lack of trying, we can make no claims against you. That makes me impartial judge. Our first witness will come from those who creep and crawl. Spider, will you please come forward? From beneath the oak leaf emerged a furry wolf spider. All 8 of her eyes glared at Kat. You, Miss Cat, are a terror of my kind. No spider is too small to attract your rude attention. Last week I watched you pluck each of my sister's 8 legs from her body. You are cruel. What say you, Cat? Mockingbird asked. Cat snorted. Spider, accusing me of cruelty. I've seen your hunts. She's no kinder than me. The other creepy crawlies turned to stare at Spider, and she gazed back innocently, as if she didn't trap or eat scores of them every week. Well then, Mockingbird said, let's move on to a witness speaking for those who slither and scuttle. Snake, are you here? The grass parted, and Snake reared his head, a grand display of serpentine glory. Yes? The mice retreat a few paces. State your piece, Snake, Mockingbird said. Certainly. This cat plays with me as if I was a piece of string. Look at him, Cat chuckled. Is it my fault that I mistake him for a cat toy? The mice giggled, and Snake leveled a malevolent glare in the direction. As one, they froze, paralyzed. Snake's tongue flickered in the air. Snake, you are dismissed. Not until Mockingbird flapped her wings did the mice fall out of their trance. For their representative, those who scurry and scamper have chosen the most persecuted of their kind. Mouse, would you please come forward? The mice scuttled back, leaving one hapless mouse alone in front. Cat couldn't help herself. Her fur twitched, and she licked her lips. Mouse eyed her nervously. Mockingbird fluffed her feathers impatiently. Mouse, do you have anything to say? Trembling, Mouse spoke in a tiny voice. She eats us. A gasp rippled through the gathered creatures. Mouse was so endearing, so cute, an angry grumble swelled. Cat shifted back on her haunches. Well, Cat, what say you? Okay, fine, I do eat mice, but someone's gotta eat them, otherwise they'll overrun the place and gobble down everything in sight. Where would you be then? Starving. Dead. You should thank me. It is my job to hunt and kill mouse, and I do it with pride. Cat had not sat idly in minutes since her trial began. Every shift and twitch of her body loosened the twine binding her paws, and now she was free. She leapt forward directly upon Mouse. The other mice scattered. Snake followed close on their heels. Spider grabbed a moth on its forelegs and haunched on its head. Order! Mockingbird screeched. Order! It was too late. The other creatures had fled. Cat held squirming Mouse beneath her paws. Let that little dear go! Mockingbird shrieked and swooped down. Her mate flew in to help. Cat hunkered down. For good reason are mockingbirds also known as catbirds. The pair pecked mercilessly at Cat's back. With her paws on Mouse, she could do nothing to defend herself. Fine, she released the mouse. Not like there aren't a million to eat later. The mockingbirds didn't let up until they had her herded to the back door of the house. It opened. Cat ducked through the gap and went straight for the food bowl. As much fun as the backyard critters are to hunt, kibble tastes better. She crunched happily. Next time, she'd be more careful where she napped. Cute. Super cute. And also, makes me think a little bit of the story where it was stealing the mangoes. And it was the animals doing like a heist on the fruit. Except obviously not the same thing. It was just like, I think the only other story we've had so far that are animals, not counting Crab Evil Genius aside. But cute. Also, Snake, you really gonna get up there and get mad at her for eating mice? What do you eat, buddy? He know. But so fun, you guys. Thank you so much for everybody who submitted, everybody that was read today. What was your guys' favorite stories? Let me know down in the comments down below. With that said, have a good week. Have a good June. And good luck next time. Don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross. Is he in trouble? We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Way. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, You chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?